So you want to start a welding business, do you? My name's Anthony, or Melton Metal Anthony for those of you who don't know who I am. I have been in business for 16 years, and I've been in the welding business specifically for 10 years. The first thing I can tell you about getting into business or being in business is just do it. Don't be afraid. Go out there, figure out the correct avenues and channels to go through and start your business. Just do it as soon as you can. That's the best advice I can give anyone. Don't be afraid. Life is too short to be afraid of anything. Now that we've gotten over that, let me tell you the actual steps to start a business. And this is any business. If you want to start a freaking fishing business, you'd start it the same way. You need to get an EIN. What an EIN is, an employer identification number. And what this does is it just makes it so that you're recognized by the federal government. You're going to need this if you want to have a bank account. You're going to need a bank account because everybody wants to pay in cash, or nobody wants to pay in cash. Everybody wants to pay in check or card these days. So you're going to need a bank account. So for that, you need this EIN. How you get the EIN is you go to your state-sponsored website. There's a website, if you're in Florida, called sunbiz.com. Each state is going to have their own website. Montana's is different, where I currently reside. But you go on there, and you pick what type of corporate formation you want to be, an LLC, a sole proprietor, a C Corp, what have you. My suggestion personally is that you go ahead and you file as an LLC. And then later on, you can file as an S Corp. But of course, consult your local tax accountant, somebody you trust. Don't just pick anybody. That's another facet of this. You must trust this person. You must thoroughly vet this person. So to segue to the next thing, after you have your EIN, you need to go ahead and open a bank account. That's why you need the EIN, is so that you're federally recognized, you're recognized by the state, so you can have a bank account. Everybody wants to pay in check and card these days, so you're gonna need a bank account. Especially if you're doing bigger jobs. Nobody's gonna give you 100 grand in cash, are they? Unless it's a drug deal. But, so you get the EIN, now you can get your bank account. After you've got those two things secured, my next step as a business owner would be to find a CPA, or a certified personal accountant or professional accountant. I might be wrong on that one. But you need to find a CPA, and like I said earlier, you need to thoroughly vet this person. I have two CPAs, one that deals with my Florida filings and one that deals with my Montana filings. I like this, and I could probably cut it down to one, but to me, it's well worth the few extra grand a year I pay. Because if one gives me an opinion I don't like, I can run it by the other one. And then come somewhere in the middle with the help of the internet to what I'm looking for, and to find a more creative solution to whatever my tax issue could be. So after you've found the CPA, it's somebody you trust, you've built a relationship with them, or you're starting to build a relationship with them, you need to look for insurance policies. This is a big holdup for a lot of guys, because it's hard to find a good insurance policy. In Florida, I never used a broker. I went on the internet, I found a policy, it ran me about $1,100 for a 1 million, 2 million. What that means is it's 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate means how many occurrences a year you can have. So I can have two $1 million occurrences. Now I carry higher limits now that I'm here in Montana and I'm taking on larger jobs. Now I carry 2.5 and 5. So again, 2.5 per incident, 5 aggregate, 5 total. So after you've got your insurance, you need to go ahead and find work, don't you? Of course you do. That's the point. That's the reason you got into business. By far the most beneficial things that have found me work have been word of mouth. I've made millions of dollars off of word of mouth. And I'm not a millionaire. That money gets spent. It gets given to the government, at fucking 40% tax that you're paying when you get up to that league. It gets spent on equipment, consumables, tools. So don't take that. Don't raise your eyebrows too high, okay? Because you'll get there too and you'll be like, God damn, I'm making employee wages and we cleared $1 million this year. It's just how it is, okay? And you can get creative as you go, and you can retain more money as you get better at it, and I'm still getting better at it every day. So word of mouth for me has been the most beneficial way for me to find work. The best way to find work is to have a good reputation, but you also have to be out there in the community. You can have a fantastic reputation amongst a small group of people, but if you're not out there in the community enough, it's not gonna jive. So you need to have both, a good balance of both. But if you're out in the community enough, but your reputation's no good, well, that can jive against you the other way, can't it? So you make sure you do good work and you keep your word. Those are the two best advertising pieces you can get, is keeping your word and doing good work. It's that simple. Another great way to get business, and this has worked for me a little bit, and believe it or not, if you've been a fan of my videos and you've watched some in the past, how I landed my Home Depot account. Google. One of the people in Home Depot, somebody in the corporate structure, Googled me. And they called me and they said, do you have these insurance limits? I said, yes. Do you have this? Do you have that? Block, can you fill out a W-9? Can you get bonding if the job is big enough? Yeah, what's your bonding capabilities? We'll talk about that later because that's something you may never see in your welding career, bonding. But Google worked great for me. Paying for AdWords, it's relatively inexpensive in the welding business. AdWords are going to vary depending on what business you're in. I'm a serial entrepreneur by definition. I've been in over 7 businesses. None of them have ever failed, but I've exited all of them because I hated them. I've been the most profitable in the welding business by far, and I think it's because it's a passion. I love to weld. I love to fabricate. I love to design stuff. So it's been a good fit for me. My first business was a bouncy castle business. It was not a good fit. I made some good money, but it was not a good fit. So Google, like I said, is another great way to get work. Another great way to get work is to join your local club, whether that be the Rotary Club, the Lions Club, Kiwanis. That's just a few of the clubs that are out there. And the reason you want to join these clubs is because the people who typically join these clubs are other business owners. And as a welder, we're kind of a support business. We're working with other businesses to weld their stuff. I don't do much homeowner work, and frankly, I don't like homeowner work because homeowners are usually a pain in the ass. Contractors understand. They're building stuff. They get it. They understand material delays. They understand things not working out exactly the way you wanted. They understand a change order. They understand that when they ask you to do something extra, it's going to be extra money. A homeowner, they usually don't get that. And it makes them a real pain in the ass a lot of the time to work for. Not saying that I haven't worked for some great homeowners who got it, but you really want to target contractors, general contractors, people who are project managers. But if you move into one of these clubs, like Kiwanis Club was the one I was a part of in Florida, you get to rub shoulders with people who are deep in the community. It was a lot of lawyers, doctors, contractors, commercial builders, and you never know what those connections are going to bring. You need connections in any business to be successful. So now you've got your clientele, you've got your insurance, you've got your CPA, you've got your EIN, you're chugging along, you're making money, it's looking good. Now, when you get deeper into things, it gets just way more complicated. Of course, welding certifications, you need to know how to read blueprints, which are all preliminary skills I would suggest you know before getting into the business. And of course, you need to know how to weld and fabricate. One of the things you can do to increase business and revenue is to expand your equipment set. You've seen Uncle Tony's been buying all sorts of fucking equipment lately. And that's because in this area, the heavier the amount of equipment I have, the narrower it gets on people's options for who they can call. So let's say I get a plasma table in here, for example. Well, I'd be one of 3 people in the county that have a plasma table. That would narrow me down. Let's say I get a sheet metal brake, narrows me down. And you keep doing it. A great piece of advice I was given by an $8 million a year business owner, another welding contractor who's a great friend of mine, he passed away, God bless him, was meet your competitor, find out what equipment he doesn't have, and buy that equipment. That was a great strategy I implemented in Florida. I was the only welder that I knew of that had a crane on his truck. I seen Icy Weld had one, and I seen Nick Bizzatis had one on their rigs. And they were doing more work than anybody else in the Instagram community. So I thought to myself, I need one of those cranes. The second I got that crane truck, I landed my first 6-figure contract. So this is a little more spacey or out there, but manifest what you want. Usually if you build it, they will come. I've never had an instance in my life where I purchased a piece of equipment and it went completely unused. When I've made a significant investment in something that I've paid attention to that there was a need for in the market, I've always come out ahead. So that's a great piece of advice for you once you're an established business. Look to purchase equipment no one else has. So now you've got all the equipment to support the area you're in. You're doing great. You're doing good work. You're starting to get deep into the paperwork. A tool I've been using for paperwork lately. I used to hire lawyers. Contract lawyers. They cost me a lot of money. I've been using AI to write my contracts. If you're not using AI to write your contracts, you're fucking up royally, okay? This year alone, and this is the end of January, this is 25, I think I've saved $20,000 in contracts. They've helped me write notice to owners for liens. They've helped me write lien release waivers. They've helped me write contracts for jobs. It's helped me write and word out contracts for my YouTube and my Melton Metal website. I mean, it's just such a great tool. And here's a little pro tip for you. Don't just use one AI. Use the different AIs to refine your contract. So what I'll do is I'll start with like ChatGPT. And I'll say, ChatGPT, I need a contract between so and so being the contractor, so being the whatever, and then go through and enter all the different figures, the odds and ends of the contract, tell it how I want to be covered, tell it how I want to cover the client, and bam, I post it out. Well, as we all know, AI is not perfect yet. So then I run it through an app called Grammarly. Goes through, it cleans it up, it makes it a lot nicer and a lot easier to understand. Then I take it from there and I'll run it through OpenAI. And I'll just keep running it through different AIs, sometimes ones I find that day. And whichever one writes me the prompt the best and the contract looks the best, it looks the most solid, and of course I do compare it to old contracts that I've had written by lawyers in the past, then I know I've got a good contract and ready to go out to my client. I reread it several times to make sure that all my bases are covered, everything that I want to be included in, everything I want from the job, everything I want from the contractor, my pay periods are all included in there. Now to segue to a different subject that again is going to be for you guys who are deep in the game and maybe you're just landing that first big job. It's called payment structure. How are you going to get paid? And I've worked with several large companies, Home Depot, Archer Western Des Moines, Kiewit, Catholic Charities, Sonic. Now I'm working with a company called Power Construction. Is by far the most professional outfit I've worked for, but they like their paperwork and they have a different pay scale than any company I've ever worked with before. So I've worked for companies where they pay me a deposit, 50%, and then a 50% at completion, which was pretty typical. And that's going to be typical for your smaller customers. I've worked for other customers that just paid me all at once. They paid me up front all at once. They just want the work done. And I've worked for other customers where it's on a draw system. So it's as per what's completed. So what I would do is, let's say I had a building and I had 10 stairways in a building that needed to be fabricated and welded in. If I finished that building, I would collect a draw, anywhere between 30 to 90 days later, depending on what's outlined in the contract. So I collect my draw. And that was by far the most common way that I've been paid by large contractors, Home Depot, Catholic Charities, Archer Western Des Moines. They would pay me in draws upon what was completed, and these draws would be finally outlined in our contract. Now, the company I'm currently working for, and this is all new to me, does a payment sheet, is basically what it is. And I submit what I finished that month, and they pay me 45 days later. I'm perfectly fine with this. It works out good, but you have to float these jobs. You have to have the capital to float these jobs. So let's segue into our next subject, being able to float work. That's right. This is the scariest thing about being in business. When you get to a certain level, you have to float the job 100%. There's going to be no more asking for a 50% deposit. You'll get to a level to which you have to float the first 30, 45, 60, 90 days, or 120 if you're working on a federal contract like I've seen my friends who are a lot bigger than me work on. So you float this for these amount of days. It means you need to have liquid capital. As a rule, you need to have so much liquid capital. You need to be able to cover breakdowns, consumables, new equipment, emergencies, whatever it might be, as well as being able to float a customer for as long as 120 days. So you have to be able to pay your bills for that 120 days. And then this is where you start making a lot more money because you're playing bank. So you have to float this customer, meaning you need to add more than that 20 or 30% of markup you would normally have on your material. So let's segue into the next segment, markups. This is going to be for anyone, really. So when you buy material, you can't just turn around and sell it to your customer at what you bought it for. You have handling time, you have storage, you have transport, you have all these factors that play into it that cost you money. It costs you money to store steel, okay? So you need to be charging for that. And now if you have to float the job on top of it, now you're holding these people are holding your money for 120 days. So you're holding a note for them. So you need to appropriately add that to your markup. When I first started, I did maybe a 20% markup, and that was me trying to be nice, trying to garner some clientele, just get my name out there, let people see my quality of work. And I had to do that again when I first moved here to Montana. There was a few scary years here in Montana where I'm floating my own house build, I'm trying to buy equipment, I'm trying to do the YouTube thing for you guys, and I'm trying to restart my business here. Very scary, but luckily we're getting over that hump. We're getting over it. And we're starting to land the right type of clients for the type of business that I'm trying to be in. So now that I'm in this sphere again, I'm in this realm, I'm back there, it's familiar territory to me, I've been there. Now I add a little more. Now I'm in between 35 to 40% markup, and that's gonna cover me floating the company. And I do it on the material side. You can also do it on your assumed labor side, So that's gonna segue into our next subject, bidding projects. I hear a lot of guys, time and material. Never trade your hours for money if you have the option. When I first moved here, I had to go back to trading my hours for money because people didn't know me. They didn't trust me. They don't want to, go off of your estimate, and then it takes you half the time and they feel robbed. But you know what? You're not paying me for my time. You're paying me for what I know, for what I've spent the past 10 years training and learning. This is not practice for me. Pay me what I'm worth, okay? And that's what it's all about. You'll get to a certain level where you're gonna need to work out of the time and material stage and work into bids. The money is in bids. Of course, you can lose big in bids too if you don't know what you're doing. So this is something that you need to practice, you need to understand. When you quote steel out, for example, you should have several different distributors, just in case maybe one doesn't have that steel, and always go with the highest price distributor. So when I quote steel out, I typically take 3 different quotes. And then I will take the highest price distributor and I will use their quote, because God forbid anybody runs out of material and we're on a deadline. I want to be able to rotate to the higher priced steel distributor and still not lose money. I don't want to lose money because somebody didn't have their stuff together. So there's a little tip for you. And do the same thing with consumables. These days, I find myself buying most of my consumables off of Amazon. It's just cheaper, it's more cost effective, it saves the customer money. And their bottom line is my bottom line. The more money I can save the customer, the better my reputation is, the more money I'll get in the long run. It's a pretty simple equation. So that segues us into our next segment here, and that is being cost effective with your customer. I say this to people all the time, because a guy has $1, that's not your problem. But because he has $10 million, that's not your problem either. It has nothing to do with you. The only thing you need to be concerned with is the work at hand, the task at hand, and appropriately and fairly pricing it based on your payment terms, who your customer is, what the material is, and how much of a pain in the ass it's going to be. If it's going to be a huge pain in the ass, these people are going to cause you trouble, mark it up. If it's going to be an easy job, you're going to be in and out, charge them appropriately. And from that, I'm going to segue into what I think is going to be our final segment here. How much should you charge for a job? God, I am sick of seeing these on the Facebook forums. No one can tell you your price. There's no one out there that can tell you. Especially you're on a forum of tens of thousands of people from all over the country where their pricing is going to be different. Their steel prices, their consumable prices, their taxes and insurances, what the state requires of them. If you're in California, it's going to be vastly different of a price than a guy in Montana. My restrictions here are very low. It's one of the reasons I moved to the state. I don't have to get anally probed by the state every time I do a job. If you're in California and you're in one of the cities, you're going to be subject to that if you're working on infrastructure. You're going to be subject to all sorts of nonsense. So factor that in when you're doing jobs. But you can't ask a group of random strangers on the internet. Your price is dictated by your overhead. And if you don't know what your overhead is and you're not taking the time to calculate it and really think it through, maybe you don't belong in business. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying it because it's the truth. I've never had trouble calculating my time and calculating what I should charge based on what the job is. I just always figure it out, you know? Every job is different, and it's gonna be different no matter where you go in the country. Well, guys, I hope this video helps you decide to start your welding business or whatever business you wanna go into. But the number one thing I wanna leave you with is make sure it's your passion. And like I said, don't be afraid, just jump into it. If you liked what you saw here today, like, subscribe, share. If you really liked it, head over to my website, meltonmetal.com. Get a hat, get a t-shirt, do what you can for your boy. It would be much obliged. And if you didn't like the video, go fuck yourself.